In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Well, again, happy Advent.
Happy Advent.
That's right. We're in the season of Advent. And not only is it Advent for the church around the world, today we celebrate our New Year's. That's right. Today is New Year's for the church. We have year A, B, and C, and we have just started year A. If you are keeping up with the lectionary and your readings, this is the year that we study Matthew. As you know, John, out of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we study him all 3 years, and there will be certain parts of the season that we will have John included. But for the most, for this year, it is Matthew, if you're keeping up. So again, today marks the beginning of Advent, the beginning of a new year, as well as the season that we prepare for the coming of the Lord. A season where we hear again the church's emphasis on hope and the future. It's why we're wearing blue. Part of what we're doing this season is preparing for the celebration of Jesus as a baby in Bethlehem, as well as the second coming of Christ. But that's not where we start here on Sunday, is it? That's not where we start in the reading today. Not at all. We do not start the Advent season with the beginning of that beautiful story of baby Jesus, or the manger, or the star, the shepherds, the wise men. But instead we start with the story of Jesus talking about the signs of the end of the world. Slap that on your Christmas card and see how it works. I always love it. It's like, what a way to start. But as we will see, the purpose of Jesus' teaching is that Jesus wants his disciples, as well as us, to be prepared to spread the gospel in an uncertain world. Imagine that, an uncertain world. None of us know what that's like, right? But just like a couple of weeks ago in Luke's gospel, what I call Luke's apocalypse, Jesus wants to teach his disciples that the world and signs of the end of time will pull them in all kinds of directions. When they are stressed by the uncertainty of the world, or that stress of life itself, or stress of uncertain things in their world, he knows that that can pull their hearts apart. It can sometimes shatter them down to their foundations, as they're going to find out. Sometimes it can make them cold. But what Jesus wants them to understand is they need to keep their mind on Christ and keep ready and prepared for the Lord at all times. I learned a little about being prepared many years ago. It's one of those days that, I don't know, maybe I should talk to a psychiatrist because it scarred me. And so I will tell you this story again. I know I've probably told this in a couple of my classes before, but I will tell it again. It was several years ago, and Karen and I lived in North Austin with the kids in a place called Pflugerville. If you know anything about Austin, you know exactly where I'm talking about. And my church was down in Buda, which is below the city limits of Austin. And so every day I would make that commute. If you know anything about Austin, you know it's one of the best cities in the world to commute. Terrible. Well, we finally decided after a while of being at Buda that we were going to sell our home and move down there. And of course, we decided to wait until the bubble burst, because that's a great time to sell your home. And so we decided, we called the realtor came, told us all the little things that you need to do, and a couple of paint some things and all that, and we took care of the house. And then she came in and did what she calls staging the house and gets it all staged. And then she said, now listen, you got to remember, you got to keep the house looking like a model at all times. And Karen and I were excited about selling the house, and we're like, absolutely, and we did. Every night before we went to bed, you're vacuuming the rugs, you're making sure the toys are put up, you make sure the bathroom looks like no one's ever used it before, you make sure the dishes are in the dishwasher, I mean the whole bit. And of course the next morning you get up a little extra early, so as you're making the lunches, all like, wipe down the counters and the sink, and like it's never been used either. And so we did that. And we would do it every day. And a couple of people came to look at the house, and we kept doing it every day. And let me tell you, when you got your house up for sale, you're a little excited about it, you don't mind doing it. Well, when a week becomes a month, And a month becomes 2 months, and 3 months, and 4 months. That excitement kind of goes away. And suddenly you don't feel like it. And well, if the toys are on the floor, we can get them tonight. If the dishes are in the sink, we can just throw them in before we go to bed. And that's kind of where we were starting to head. But it was one particular Sunday, the scar that I talk about, that I have, that we were down. I was preaching at my church on Sunday, and we had an event right after. And so it was about 1:30 or so, and well, we were all hungry, and we decided to go home. And so we went home, and we prepared lunch, and we all ate and talked about the day, and that fun stuff. And the kids started to play in the living room with Legos and with their dolls and all of that. And so Karen said, "Hey, can you help me? We had laundry to do." The typical routine on Sunday. You're getting ready for Monday morning. And so I go up and I help her with the clothes, and we got them in the dark, the whites, the colors, and she's got them into the washing machine going. And I decided after all of that is done, I'm tired, I want to take a power nap. I take power naps on Sunday for 30 minutes so I can just knock out and be ready to go again. Well, I sat down in my recliner, turned on the football game, the kids are playing, and I was out like that. And about 10 minutes in my nap, it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, the phone rings. It's a realtor. She said, "My clients have seen your house and they love it. They would like to see your house again." And I said, "Well, that's wonderful." And so in my groggy state, I'm looking for a pen to write her information down. And I said, "When would she like to see the house? Or when would they like to see the house?" She said, "Well, actually, we're at your front door right now." 3:30 on a Sunday evening, let me remind you. I remember Karen coming down, and she looked at me and going, "Who is that?" And I'm like, "It's a realtor, and they're right behind you." And she starts to panic. And so I say, the only thing I know to say is, "Well, can you give us about 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll be out, and you guys can look at it." And I will never forget the lady kind of giving me that really disappointing voice, going, "Well, okay, if you have to. Sorry." So we went in as quick as possible. We began to clean everything. And I'm telling you right now, I think NASCAR would be proud of us. We cleaned that house so fast, vacuuming, screaming at the poor little kids. They didn't know what was going on. They're just running, they're just throwing, I'm surprised they threw it in the garbage, They were just trying to get rid of everything. And finally we get the whole house set, ready to go. And we walked out and we said, "We're sorry for the inconvenience, please take a look at the house." And they did. They went in and they spent that really long 5 minutes. It took me longer to clean the bathroom. And then they left. And of course they didn't buy the house. But it did teach me a lesson. Obviously that story is still fresh in my mind today. It actually taught me a lesson about being prepared, and being prepared every day. While I was preparing for this sermon, I did think about this story. It was one of the first things to pop in my mind and thought to myself, like my house being prepared, is our Christian life prepared for Jesus' opportunities? And that's what I want to talk about today. Did you hear the word I just used? Jesus' opportunities. Because just like the realtor knocking on my door, I promise you, Jesus knocks on yours all the time. In the gospel this morning, the reading may be a little scary, or you may wonder about it. And let me tell you, in the early church, they really did. There are many cults and denominations that have actually been very preoccupied with that image, the image of the end of time. We have denominations and churches that we've all heard about where they're so overcome by it. They're looking for mathematical formulas in the scriptures. They're looking at the readings and wondering when the end of time is going to be. But the problem is they're so preoccupied with it, they're not doing what Jesus has really commanded us to do. And so Jesus wants us to be very careful. He wanted His followers to be very, very careful. The message, again, is about being prepared in an uncertain world. And I think that our Christian lives can be very much like my house. And that is, to be prepared some of the time, but not all the time, does not work. Because, again, if you're like me, opportunities only come when I least expect it. And I bet in your lives it's the same way. And Jesus wants His followers to be ready for those opportunities. Again, the story that Jesus tells us is not a scary movie. But instead, Jesus' story of the future was actually Matthew's community's reality. What we see as a scary story of all these things happening became a reality for Matthew's people. They felt that their world was truly coming to an end, and in fact, they are right. It was coming to an end. Their world would never be the same. Talk about uncertain times, and I know there are times that we think are uncertain, but let me tell you, it's nothing like the time of Matthew. The Romans were destroying their world. They got upset about the uprisings, and the Romans decided to take care of business right away by destroying all of Jerusalem. I'm sure for many, as in Jesus' Gospel, as it says, it was no different than the days of Noah's flood. Think about it. One minute they're having weddings, celebrating, enjoying life, and the next day your family and friends are being butchered by the Romans. Imagine, can you even imagine, as much as we love our church right here, can you imagine what it was like to see the temple that you worship, and not only that, but you knew where God was in the world, in that temple, in the ark, was suddenly destroyed, burnt, and put into rubble. Can you imagine? Can you imagine as Jesus talked about two people standing, one is suddenly gone. Jesus is not talking about a magic trick that suddenly happens, but instead, Jesus is talking about the realities of a Roman war which Matthew's community faced. You see, when the soldiers came, many times they would take people into slavery, and there was nothing you could do about it. Two people could be out in the field and you go to check on them and they're suddenly gone. Two women could be sitting there grinding a meal together, and the Romans come and they say, I'm taking you but not you, and just leaving, and suddenly they're gone. Can you imagine going to find your family and they're not there, and you run to your next door neighbors to find out only half of them are there? That was the reality. These are parts of the sign of the end of times. So was Jesus' followers prepared? Well, this must have been on Matthew's mind. This was extremely important to Matthew and to his community he's preaching to. They were not prepared for war. Obviously, they didn't have the equipment or the money or the weapons. But instead, Matthew's concern was that he did not want his followers losing who they were or felt that they were lost. He wanted them to see that through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that there is a thing called hope. And hope is something he wanted them all to have and to embrace and to truly believe. It is vital that all were prepared for the opportunities that was about to happen after the fall of Jerusalem, which many did feel again like it was the end of the world. I can't say that enough, because it really was to them. I believe that this is the reason why Matthew wrote about it in his story of Jesus' future signs of the end of the world and his warning. He wanted them to know that Jesus has already told us about these things happening. It was not to resemble again a scary movie, but instead to make sure that Matthew's followers were prepared for the opportunities that Jesus was talking about and would make happen. And guess what? Matthew talked about it, they heard the words of Christ, and they were. They were prepared. In an uncertain world, this group of followers were prepared. Jesus takes his destruction, and he makes opportunities for all of these followers. Through the destruction, the fires, the Romans, the rubble, the Gospels are written. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John realized how important it is to get it down on papyrus, on paper, so that they could start to spread it. And they began to write the stories, the oral traditions that were out there about Jesus. And they began to do that project right away. The way, that's what the early church was called, was the way. The way was getting bigger. Our house churches began to grow at enormous rates. And the gospel of Jesus was being spread throughout the region. And they were prepared. So what about us? Are we truly prepared for what Jesus' opportunities are heading our way? Not just as individuals, but also as a church. Are we truly ready for the opportunities that God has for all of us? Well, I will tell you right now, it takes all of us. It takes all of us as a church to be ready for God's opportunities. The message that Jesus gives to His followers 2,000 years ago is no different for us today. I think that what feels like uncertain times, and sometimes it does, Jesus is telling us that we do not need to be consumed by it. If He wanted us to be consumed by it, He would have told us when it was going to happen. But instead, He tells us, and this is so important, He tells us that no one knows the end of time, not the angels, not the Son, but God Himself. Think about it. If we were preoccupied with the ends of time, and that's the only thing we could think about, could we really be disciples and servants of God? If we knew that it was going to be 20,000 years from now, we may be like the man with the barns and saying, you know what, soul, sit back, relax, be merry, enjoy life. Who cares? That's a long time for people then to worry about. On the flip side, if we found out it was next week, we would be scared, and we would be holding on to each other, and we'd be grabbing our families and making phone calls as fast as we could. But in both scenarios, we would not be serving God, and we are called to serve Him. So in this uncertain world, do we hide? Do we shame ourselves? What do we do? No. Instead, Jesus is talking about, again, us being prepared every day. Like my home, I needed to be ready every day for someone to look at the house. And in the same way, we need to be prepared for Jesus coming into our lives with opportunities every single day. Like the realtor, Jesus knocks on your door too. So again, are you prepared? That's the question. Are you truly prepared for the opportunities God is sending your way? I will tell you that He is. Are you prepared truly for the God's opportunities for the poor in our own county, in Dallas, and throughout the world? Are we truly prepared to help those who are seeking Christ and bringing them to church, or listening to their story and sharing our own? Again, are we prepared to help the destitute? Or how about those who feel excluded in this world? Are we ready to grab them by the arm and say, come, you're included in the kingdom of God? Well, my friends, Advent is the season for preparing for Christ. That's what the season is about. Both His birth, Jesus coming in the flesh and walking among us, as well as His second coming. But we also have to be prepared for the in-between. The opportunities that Jesus gives us now in our lives. This is so important. And this is what Advent again is all about, is taking time out of this busy world to prepare our lives for the everyday opportunities that God has in store for us. How? The first thing you do during Advent is, for Pete's sake, slow down. I know that that sounds insane this time of year, but we truly need to slow down. The Episcopal Church used to have a great Advent calendar. Do you remember those big sheet Advent calendars? It used to say, slow down, it's Advent. We need to find those again. We need to truly slow down, even though the world tells us to speed up. And I'll tell you, I actually had to laugh because on Thanksgiving Day, I was starting to count and lost count how many times I was told I needed to hurry. You heard the commercials. You better hurry. The Toyota-thon is going to be over by next week. You better hurry. The Macy's Day one-day sale is this Saturday. You better hurry. Belts clothing sale. I swear it's the same guy who does that. But that's all. I kept counting how many times I heard, you better hurry. You better hurry. But I'm telling you, you need to slow down. Another thing we need to do in Advent, and I think this is very important, is to read. Maybe we need to just pull ourselves out of the stressful world at times and sit down and read. And there are so many Advent readings that you can do. Devotionals. If you don't have one physically, I promise you there are a ton of them online. I know that the world is telling you to shop right now, but we need to take the time to read. And here's some advice. If you really feel stressed this time of year, this is what you need to be doing, along with the next thing, and that is praying. We need to slow down and we need to pray and ask God to show us the opportunities that He has for us. Do it during your devotional, as well as if you have an Advent wreath. That's what the Advent wreath is for. Light it. Pray. Talk to God about the opportunities that God has for your future. And then lastly, seek. Seek the opportunities that God has, because I'm going to tell you, He knocks on your door every day. But don't seek looking up in the sky. Don't seek by looking behind your closed lids as you pray. Seek through other people. People that are homeless. People who are hungry. People who are hurting. People who are lonely. We all have this responsibility, not just me. We all have this responsibility. And we need to seek these opportunities that God has for us. If we're prepared for Jesus, then instead of a bleak and uncertain future that we at times feel we have, we can give our lives to the hope of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, knowing that all will be okay. That this is not the end of the story, but Jesus is just the beginning. Be prepared for Christ. Prepare your body, mind, and soul. And happy Advent. Amen.